Nobody told you this, and honestly, when I first came across this story, I had to stop and read it twice because I could not believe that in all the years we have been talking about Princess Kate and Prince William's wedding, this part of the story never made it into the mainstream coverage. We saw the dress. We saw the kiss on the balcony. We saw the flowers and the carriages and the crowds lining the streets of London for miles. But nobody told you what was actually happening behind those palace walls in the weeks leading up to that wedding. Nobody told you about the panic. Nobody told you about the security crisis. Nobody told you about the quiet conversation over tea that changed everything. And that is exactly what we are going to talk about today, because this story deserves to be told in full. Let me take you back. It is late 2010. Prince William has just proposed to Kate Middleton in Kenya, slipping his late mother, Princess Diana's iconic sapphire and diamond ring onto her finger. The whole world goes absolutely crazy. Americans especially, we have always had this deep love for the British royal family, and the idea of this young, handsome prince and this beautiful, warm, completely relatable young woman from a regular family getting married. It felt like a fairy tale that was actually coming true in real life. The engagement is announced on November 16, 2010, and from that moment on, the wedding planning machine kicks into high gear inside Buckingham Palace. Now, here is something most Americans do not fully appreciate about royal weddings. It is not like planning a regular wedding, even a very big, very expensive one. A royal wedding is a military-level operation. There are hundreds of palace staff involved. There are courtiers, which are essentially the most senior and experienced, royal advisors, people who have spent their entire careers managing royal events and royal protocol. There are security teams, logistics teams, communications teams. There are people whose entire job is to make sure that every single detail of a royal event follows the traditions and the protocols that have been in place for generations. And when it comes to something as significant as the wedding of the future King of England, every single one of those people is working around the clock to make sure nothing goes wrong. And for these courtiers, these experienced palace insiders, there was one thing about the wedding day that was simply not up for discussion. It was not even on the list of things to decide, because it had already been decided by tradition itself. Princess Kate would arrive at Westminster Abbey in the glass coach. That was it. That was the plan. Nobody needed to ask. Nobody needed to confirm. It was as certain as the sun rising. The glass coach is this beautiful, ornate, horse-drawn carriage that has been used by the British royal family for over a century. If you are an American in your 50s, there is a very good chance that you remember watching Princess Diana climb into that very coach on July 29, 1981, in that breathtaking David and Elizabeth Emmanuel wedding gown, and riding through the streets of London to St. Paul's Cathedral. That image is burned into the memory of an entire generation. Queen Elizabeth herself had used the glass coach. It was tradition. It was history. It was simply what royal brides did on their wedding day. And so, when palace staff began laying out the detailed plans for Princess Kate's arrival at Westminster Abbey, the glass coach was written in as a given. No discussion needed, except Princess Kate had other ideas. According to royal biographer Russell Myers, who spent years speaking with palace insiders and people close to the couple for his biography of William and Kate, Princess Kate quietly but clearly told palace officials that she did not want to travel in the glass coach. She was not going to use it. And the reason she gave was actually quite thoughtful and quite revealing about who she is as a person. She said she did not feel she was yet a princess who should arrive in that way. She was not yet officially part of the royal family. She was still Kate Middleton, a woman about to become a princess, but not yet one. And she wanted her arrival to feel modern. She wanted it to feel like her. She wanted something that reflected the kind of royal she intended to be, which was not a copy of the past, but something new, something genuine, something real, so she chose a car. Specifically, she chose to arrive at Westminster Abbey in Queen Elizabeth's 1977 Rolls-Royce Phantom 6. A sleek, elegant, deeply impressive vehicle, but still a car. Not a horse-drawn carriage that had carried queens and princesses for over 100 years. A car. Now I want you to picture the faces of the palace courtiers when they heard this. These are people who have dedicated their professional lives to royal tradition and royal protocol. These are people who do not like surprises. These are people who had already mentally filed away the glass coach under confirmed and done, and moved on to the next 1,000 decisions that needed to be made for this wedding. And now, the bride, this woman who was not yet even officially a member of the royal family, was telling them she wanted to change one of the most visible and most symbolic traditions of the entire ceremony. They panicked. That is not my word, by the way. That is the word used by people who were there, people who spoke to Russell Myers for his book. There was panic at the palace, and it was not just about the tradition being broken, although that alone was enough to send certain courtiers into a tailspin. The panic had a very specific, very serious, very practical reason, and this is the part of the story that almost nobody knows. Just a few months before Princess Kate and Prince William's wedding was scheduled to take place, there had been an incident in London that had shaken the royal family and the Metropolitan Police to their core. It was December 2010, and King Charles, who was then the Prince of Wales, and his wife Camilla, the Duchess of Cornwall, were traveling through central London in a royal Rolls-Royce on their way to the Royal Variety performance at the Palladium. The streets of London were packed that night because there were major protests happening in the city, tens of thousands of people demonstrating over university tuition fee increases, and as the royal car moved through the crowd, things turned violent. Protesters surrounded the vehicle. They splattered white paint all over the car, and then someone smashed the rear window. While Charles and Camilla were inside, the images went around the world. It was a serious security incident, a frightening moment, and a stark reminder that even in the heart of London, on a royal route, with police escorts and security personnel, a royal vehicle could be targeted and attacked. And now, a few months later, Princess Kate was telling the palace she wanted to arrive at her wedding in that same type of vehicle, a Rolls-Royce, on a public route through central London. On a day when the eyes of the entire world would be watching, and when the streets would be absolutely packed with people. You can imagine why the palace panicked. The Metropolitan Police had to immediately launch a full security review. Every officer assigned to the wedding route had to be rebriefed. Patrol plans had to be redrawn. Additional security measures had to be put in place. The entire logistics of the procession had to be reconsidered, all because one woman had quietly said she preferred a car over a carriage. What looked from the outside like a simple personal preference had triggered a massive urgent security operation behind the scenes. And what I find so fascinating about this, what I think says so much about Princess Kate as a person, is that she did not back down. She knew what she wanted. She had thought about it. She had a reason for it that she believed in, and she held her ground. Even as courtiers scrambled and security teams worked overtime, even as people with decades of royal experience were telling her this was not how things were done, Princess Kate stayed calm and stayed the course. She was not being difficult. She was not being a diva. She was being exactly who she is, a woman with a quiet, steady confidence that a lot of people underestimated and still sometimes underestimate today. Now let me tell you about the other thing that was happening during this time, because the security scramble was not the only extraordinary thing going on behind the scenes. While all of this chaos was unfolding among palace staff, Queen Elizabeth herself decided to step in. And what she did next tells you everything you need to know about how the late Queen felt about Princess Kate. Queen Elizabeth invited Princess Kate to Buckingham Palace for what was described as an informal catch-up over tea, just the two of them, one-on-one in the private quarters of the palace. Now think about that for a moment. This is Queen Elizabeth II we are talking about. One of the most powerful, most experienced, most respected figures in the entire world. A woman who had been on the throne since 1952. A woman who had navigated decades of political crises, family scandals, the death of Princess Diana, the changing face of the British monarchy. She did not have to make time for informal tea meetings with her grandson's fiancé. She had 1,000 things demanding her attention at any given moment. But she chose to do this. She chose to sit down with Princess Kate, personally, quietly, away from the cameras and the courtiers, and make her feel supported. According to Russell Myers, at that tea, Queen Elizabeth reassured Princess Kate that there would be plenty of room on the guest list for her family and the people she loved. If you have ever planned a big wedding, you know how stressful the guest list can be, and now multiply that by about 1,000, and you get some idea of what Princess Kate was dealing with. The Middletons, this wonderful, warm, close-knit family from Berkshire, were suddenly trying to figure out where they fit into a wedding that also had to accommodate foreign royal families, heads of state, prime ministers from across the Commonwealth, and centuries of royal protocol about who sits where and why. Having the Queen personally tell her that her loved ones would be taken care of was an enormous weight off Princess Kate's shoulders. But then, Queen Elizabeth did something even more extraordinary. She offered Princess Kate the opportunity to choose a tiara from her personal, private jewelry collection, her own tiaras, pieces that had been in the Queen's personal possession for decades, some of them gifts, some of them inherited, all of them priceless, all of them steeped in history. For a woman who was not yet even officially a member of the royal family, who had grown up in a regular home in Berkshire, who had gone to university and worked normal jobs before falling in love with a prince, being offered access to the Queen's personal tiara collection was, as Myers described it, a startling gesture. It was the Queen saying, in the most tangible and beautiful way possible, "You are one of us now. You belong here. I trust you. I believe in you." Princess Kate ended up wearing the Cartier Halo Scroll tiara on her wedding day, a piece with its own remarkable history, originally purchased by King George VI for his wife, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, in 1936, the same year he became king. It was then given to the current Queen Elizabeth as an 18th birthday present. So the tiara that Princess Kate wore as she walked down the aisle at Westminster Abbey had been part of the royal family's story for over 70 years before it ever touched her head. That is the kind of moment that gives you chills when you really think about it. And through all of this, through the transport debate and the security review and the tea with the Queen and the tiara selection and the 1,000 other decisions that had to be made, Prince William was right there. This is something I think gets overlooked sometimes in the telling of this story. People talk about Princess Kate's strength and her grace and her ability to handle the pressure, and she absolutely deserves every bit of that credit. But Prince William was navigating this alongside her. He had watched his mother, Princess Diana, be consumed by the pressures of royal life. He had seen what the institution could do to a person who was not given the support and the space they needed. And he was absolutely determined that Princess Kate would have both. He was protective. He was present. He was her partner in every sense of the word, not just standing next to her at the altar, but standing next to her in every conversation, every negotiation, every moment of pressure that came with planning the most watched wedding in the world. There is actually another moment from the engagement period that I think is worth mentioning here, because it gives you a fuller picture of what Princess Kate was going through during this time. When the engagement was announced in November 2010, Princess Kate and Prince William had to sit down and do a live television interview. Now, most of us, if we are being honest, find television interviews nerve-wracking under any circumstances. Imagine doing one the day you announce your engagement to the future King of England, with the entire world watching, with reporters analyzing every word you say, with the knowledge that this interview is going to be broadcast in dozens of countries and discussed for years to come. According to royal author Katie Nicholl, Princess Kate had been dreading that interview. She was not comfortable with it, and in the moments before it began, she was visibly anxious. Prince William leaned over to her and quietly encouraged her to breathe. Just breathe. And she turned to him and said, with a small laugh, "I am not very good at that. That little moment, that tiny human exchange between two nervous, excited, deeply in love people on the biggest day of their lives to that point tells you so much about their relationship. It tells you about his gentleness and his attentiveness. It tells you about her humor and her self-awareness. It tells you that underneath all the pomp and the protocol and the global spectacle, these were two real people who were genuinely, deeply in love and genuinely, deeply nervous about getting everything right. Now let's come back to April 29th, 2011. Wedding Day. The whole world is watching. Somewhere around 2 billion people, by various estimates, are tuned in to this event in one form or another. The streets of London are packed with people who have, in many cases, been there since the night before, sleeping on the pavement just to get a glimpse of the procession. Americans are setting their alarms for the middle of the night to watch the coverage live. It is, without any exaggeration, one of the most watched events in the history of television. And Princess Kate steps out of that Rolls-Royce. She is wearing the Alexander McQueen gown designed by Sarah Burton, and it is, I think we can all agree, one of the most beautiful wedding dresses ever made. The lace, the silhouette, the way it moved, it was perfection. She is holding a bouquet of myrtle, lily of the valley, sweet William and hyacinth. Her father, Michael Middleton, is beside her, and you can see on his face this mixture of overwhelming pride and barely contained emotion that I think any parent watching at home recognized immediately. And she is smiling. She is not stiff. She is not performing. She is genuinely, radiantly happy, and that happiness comes right through the screen. The Rolls-Royce had worked perfectly. The security review had done its job. The Metropolitan Police had everything under control. The courtiers who had panicked a few months earlier had found their way through it. And Princess Kate had arrived at her wedding exactly as she had wanted to, in a way that felt modern and true to herself, and it looked absolutely stunning. After the ceremony, after Prince William had seen her walking down that aisle and had turned to his brother Harry and said, "Apparently, wait till you see her," which is one of the sweetest things I have ever heard, and after they had exchanged their vows in front of the world, Princess Kate and Prince William rode back through the streets of London together in the 1902 State Landau carriage. The same open-top carriage that Princess Diana and Prince Charles had used after their wedding in 1981. The crowd lining the route went absolutely wild. And there was something deeply moving about that choice. This young couple using the same carriage as William's parents, a subtle nod to the past, a quiet acknowledgement of the history they were now part of, even as they were so clearly forging their own path. And I think that balance between honoring tradition and being boldly, unapologetically themselves is really the heart of this whole story. Princess Kate did not refuse the glass coach because she was rebellious or because she did not care about royal tradition. She is, by all accounts, someone who takes history and protocol and the weight of royal responsibility very seriously. She refused it because she had thought deeply about who she was and what she wanted to represent. And she had the quiet, steady courage to stand by that even when it created a panic, even when it inconvenienced people, even when it meant going against something that had been done the same way for generations. That is not a small thing. That takes a kind of inner strength that most people, if they are honest, are not sure they would have in that situation. And what I keep coming back to, the thing that I think matters most about this story for those of us watching from the outside, is what it tells us about the relationship between Princess Kate and Prince William at its core. This is a couple that had already been through a lot by the time they got to that wedding day. They had met at university, fallen in love, broken up, gotten back together, spent years navigating the extraordinary pressures of his royal life and the relentless intrusion of the press, and come out the other side more solid, more committed, more deeply bonded than ever. And what you see in this story about the wedding planning, in Princess Kate's willingness to say, "This is who I am, and this is what I want," and in Prince William's support of her through every step of it, is a couple that was going into that marriage as genuine equals, not a prince and a commoner, not a royal and an outsider, but two people who had chosen each other freely and completely and were building something together on their own terms. The wedding of Princess Kate and Prince William was watched by more people than almost any other event in modern television history. It was called the Wedding of the Century, and it deserved that name, not just because of the spectacle and the history and the extraordinary visual beauty of the whole thing, but because of the very human story underneath it all. A story about a young woman who was brave enough to say no to a tradition that did not feel right for her. A story about a palace in panic mode trying to keep up with a bride who knew her own mind. A story about a queen who sat down for a quiet cup of tea and reminded a nervous young woman that she was valued and trusted and welcomed. A story about a prince who stood by his future wife every step of the way. Nobody told you this. The cameras showed you the perfect wedding. They showed you the dress and the flowers and the carriage and the balcony kiss. But they did not show you the real story. They did not show you what it actually took for Princess Kate to walk through those palace doors and become the woman the world fell in love with that day. Now you know. And I think knowing it makes the whole thing even more extraordinary than it already was. If this story moved you or surprised you or made you see Princess Kate and Prince William in a new light, I would really love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me what you thought, or tell me which royal story you want me to dive into next. There are so many more untold stories where this one came from, and I cannot wait to share them with you. Make sure you subscribe so you do not miss a single one. I will see you in the next video.